Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. This is episode 9B, or part 2 with Sean Casey on nutrition and supplementation for athletes. If you missed part 1, please go back to building-better-athletes.com. Under the podcast tab, find our latest episode 9A with Sean Casey, as he talked about more supplementation. And he rattled off about 9 different supplements, and we went into the efficacy, the research on these supplements, and how they may be implemented with athletes. In this episode, Sean talks more about how he addresses different nutritional deficiencies or addresses nutritional needs for different athletes and what he sees lacking in many athletes' diet and how he hopes to help athletes with just simple strategies and tips to improve their nutrition and diet. We also discussed the differences between grass-fed, free-range, meat, poultry, beef, dairy, those kind of things, and also organic versus non-organic fruits and vegetables. Overall, it was another great addition or episode with Sean here on the Elite Performance Podcast. So without further ado, let's go meet with Sean. Awesome. So let's talk about you working with athletes. I know you consult and work with a lot of athletes from many different levels, high-level athletes. You work with a badminton player who finished with the bronze this past summer at the Olympics. How awesome is that, huh?
That was pretty exciting. It was an exciting time. He's a very hard worker. In the grand scheme of things, I'm just a small cog in a much bigger wheel. But it was an exciting time. As yourself as a coach, you always get excited when you see people do well, and especially if they're hardworking and more importantly they're good people. So it was a fun time on that level.
And so you worked with from badminton to endurance to speed power athletes. So when you're looking at these athletes and you're talking with them, what are some of the biggest areas that you see that athletes need improvement? Where are they deficient at, or what areas are they maybe unknowledgeable, or they need improvement, that the quick switches that you can change their kind of behavior or the nutrition for the better?
All right. So if I had to break it down, so the first thing, kind of global, is just teaching them to eat food. No, you're not, obviously supplements are nice, but it's a supplement to your diet. Your entire financial income or your whatever money you're making should not necessarily go to supplements. It should go to a well-rounded food. Obviously, supplements have great things, but food is the number one thing. Make that a priority. Kind of some easy things I see repetitively are athletes under eating for the amount of physical activity that they're doing. So many athletes I work with, especially if they're very hard training, are significantly under eating, and they don't even realize how much they're under eating. Sports are physically demanding. Training hard is physically demanding. I work with people who are eating, 3 to 5,000 calories. That's not necessarily an uncommon thing for me. And what I often find is, instantly I increase the amount of calories in their diet, and their performance instantly jumps up, on that level. It's kind of the equivalent of, before you get glasses, it's like, okay, my eyesight's kind of bad, but I can still do fine. And then all of a sudden you get glasses and you're like, holy shit, I was as blind as a bat. I really wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. That's kind of equivalent to adding food in there. The other things I find quite often, and this is kind of differs between men and women, I find guys tend to go overboard on the amount of protein they're eating and just go like gangbusters thinking they need, a bazillion plus 5 grams of protein. On the flip side of things, again, these are generalities. This doesn't necessarily hit everyone. On the flip side, though, I find females are very concerned about eating, taking any sort of, be it a protein supplement or increasing protein in their diet, be it eggs, be it dairy, be it, meat, whatever it is, because they have this concern that if I eat more protein, I'm going to get big and bulky muscles. It's kind of the same thing I'm sure you see with a lot of your athletes there at Building Better Athletes, where, especially females, they're concerned about getting bulky on that level. So that's an easy thing I see that I'm usually able to do a quick fix, and people relatively quick feel, changes. I would say the third thing would be, and this is a little bit more geared towards females, although there's definitely males who fall into this category, but concerns about eating dietary fat. A lot of I find are concerned that if I eat dietary fat, I'm going to start putting on body fat myself, and especially in society today, there's such an emphasis, for females to have a certain figure, where I find a lot of them are very concerned about dietary fat. So I work hard educating them to make sure that they realize, healthy fats are good. It has positive, eating, if you're not eating enough healthy fats, your estrogen and testosterone levels are going to be lower, which for obviously estrogen for females has very anti-inflammatory benefits beyond the normal sex steroid benefits. And then obviously testosterone for guys for muscle mass purposes. So those are kind of the three things I kind of hit right away. If I have an athlete, obviously I'm throwing a lot of stuff out here. The biggest thing I simply see though is they don't eat breakfast, especially at the high school or grade school level, is not eating breakfast. So that's an easy point from a coach's standpoint. You can educate your athletes. If all of a sudden you give them a good breakfast, what are you also giving them? You're probably giving them a few more calories. You're probably giving them healthier sources of protein, and you're probably also potentially having some healthy dietary fats in there. So like I said, the three things I see most often are protein is, wonky. They're not eating enough calories, and their dietary fats could be off. Simply by having people eating a healthy breakfast, it takes care of all three of those immediately. That's
awesome. So what are some of your favorite breakfast suggestions to an athlete?
My favorite ones are, for athletes, I think eggs are a great breakfast. I'm not necessarily saying you have to eat, 8 eggs or anything like that. And, but, have them make, say, anywhere from, depending on what else in their diet, a couple eggs in the morning or 3 eggs in the morning. I think oatmeal is a great option on that level. There's a lot of health benefits. And oatmeal is one of those things that's very easy to add in, say, a little bit of brown sugar for flavoring. Don't go gangbusters on the sugar, but add a little brown sugars. Or I like to add cinnamon and raisins into mine. Or that's an easy thing right there that you can make super quick, 5 minutes or less. Smoothies are another thing you can make in 5 minutes or less. Frozen fruit, you can get frozen fruit. Often frozen fruit is significantly cheaper than fresh fruit, has the same health benefits. You can get frozen fruit, maybe add some yogurt into it, and whatever else you want to add into it. But then you can get really quick, healthy things right off the bat with those three options.
How about for other thing I find is athletes severely lacking fruit and vegetable consumption. So they're lacking many, micronutrients, phytonutrients, all that kind of stuff. What are some ways you like to hide or get them to get more of those greens and veggies in their diets?
Yeah, that's a great thing, and that's a very common one too, is the fruits and vegetable things. Easy ways that I do it are most smoothies, go back to your smoothies, you can hide vegetables. Spinach blends very well into smoothies and you don't pick up the taste, or there's different things on that level. So hiding things in smoothies. The other thing I do is, I realize, of the two, fruits are probably more popular than vegetables for most people because it's slightly sweeter. But I like, putting peanut butter on a lot of things. Be it you're putting it on celery, you're putting it on apples. Awesome combination for those listening. If you grab an apple, a lot of people put peanut butter on it, but if you add cinnamon on top of that peanut butter, which is on top of that apple, it's a game changer. Trust me on that. But so that's a great combination: apples, peanut butter, and cinnamon. But like put peanut butter on there, peanut butter on apple. I just said apples, bananas. But there's a lot of things you can do with peanut butter. The other things I'm perfectly okay with, and some of my counterparts may argue otherwise, but I have no problem if somebody wants to cook broccoli and throw some butter or cheese on it. That's perfectly fine with me. I mean, not that I would necessarily put on 5 pounds of cheese on everything, but I think having, be it broccoli or be it whatever, add some cheese to it can really enhance the flavor of it. And eating it with cheese is better than not eating it at all. And like you said, there's so many nutrients. And I think that's sometimes where you have to look realistic. I would like to say I could instantly change everyone's diet and they'd be eating like this perfect pie in the sky type diet. That's not reality, And so I'm perfectly cool adding that, or green beans and adding butter to them, or stir fried vegetables, or things of that nature. Or even using ranch dip if you like carrots or raw vegetables on that end.
That's what I say. Ranch dressing gets it's a bad rap, but I said if you're gonna eat, I can get you to eat a handful of carrots and a handful of broccoli and cauliflower, but you have to dip in ranch. Hey, I'm okay with that as long as I love ranch. But if you got to dip it in ranch, eat that. I'd rather have you eat that than, like you said, not having that in your diet, or go the hot pocket or pizza route where you get
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, having 3 tablespoons of ranch dressing a day is not going to set you back too bad. And like I have no problem making, I don't necessarily want to call it a sacrifice because I don't think that has kind of a negative connotation to it. But I have absolutely no issue if I can increase the amount of vegetables in your diet by adding a little bit of French to it. I consider that a win.
Now, back to your breakfast, a question I get all the time is, I tell athletes all the time, have eggs for breakfast or, make hard-boiled eggs, and on the way to your school, crack it, open it up. As this tends to be more from females as well, is should I eat the yolk? Tell us about why not to eat the yolk.
Yep. So the yolk, originally came up. I remember when I was even going through college. So this would have been roughly 10 years ago or so. There's even at that time, like the research started coming out where it used to be this idea that the yolks, that dietary cholesterol contributed to blood cholesterol levels. And, I guess on a surface level, that makes sense. If I eat more cholesterol, doesn't that naturally give me more cholesterol? But what, the body naturally synthesizes cholesterol, and it can up and down, increase and decrease production of that pretty easy based off your diet. More of the research coming out now shows that, eggs really, the yolks of eggs don't have any bad, effects for a majority of the people. There's, a few people that have various genetic defects, but for the majority, it has absolutely no issue. And what a lot of people don't realize is, personally, if I had to eat from looking at things purely from a nutritional health standpoint, if I had to eat only the egg or not the egg, only the yolk or the white, I would eat the yolk every single day of the week. The yolk is where you have most of your antioxidants in it. A myth is that the yolk is fat, all the fats in the yolk and all the proteins in the white. That's actually false. You have, I want to say it's about 40% of the protein of an egg is actually found in the yolk. So if you throw away that yolk, you're actually missing out on some of the protein benefit. But you have there and there, your iron, a lot of your minerals and vitamins are found in that yolk itself. So that is super healthy, and I strongly encourage people to, consume that in their diet. Going back to one of your previous questions, it just popped in my mind. I forgot to mention it. Another easy thing that I find really quickly changes performance, especially in your high school and middle school athletes, is making sure they have some sort of snack roughly about 2 o'clock. So you know how it is. A lot of, that can be, be it a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or, something easy they can take to school with them. And, I'm not expecting them to have steak and asparagus at 2 p.m. every day, but, something they can take with them to school. Because most kids have their lunch anywhere from 11 to 12. If you kind of go back to what I believe, especially if you're looking to maximize physical performance for sports, eating every, say, 4 hours is, pretty beneficial. So you look at your kid who maybe he had 11:30 lunch. He had 11:30 lunch. He gets to your place or he starts his athletic practice at 4 p.m. So we're already now roughly 4 hours without much food. He practices or trains for an hour and a half. He gets home post-drive. He's getting home at 6:30, 7 o'clock. We also now have a 6-hour window where we had absolutely no nutrition in there. I find if I can get a kid, it can be as simple, like it says, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, roughly at that 2 p.m. standpoint. Their energy levels are much better during the training session, and overall they have much better training effect on that level.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. Like you said, same in, how can you expect to perform without any kind of energy or any kind of fuel or any kind of, something in your system to help provide that energy for you? And same in the morning. And these athletes, they want to put on weight, whether they've meals, yet they eat at 7 a.m., then they eat at 12, and they eat at 6. You had 3 meals in 12 hours. I mean, what do you expect? You got to have some sort of, accountability in terms of planning the night before a morning snack and afternoon snack if you really want to maximize your performance.
Yeah, unless you're one of those people who can throw down 1,000 calories of solid whole food based thing in one sitting, which I don't know hardly anyone who can. You're in a caloric deficit before you're even halfway through the day, which makes it tough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go to some more nutritional type things here. So what is the difference? So the big thing now today is you get your meats, you get your dairies, you get your poultry. Is to get grass fed or free range? Is there a big difference between getting the grass fed, the free range beef, dairy, cheese, milk, poultry compared to just your normal grain fed?
You know, if you're having something that has a lot of dietary fat and there's some difference, and most of where it comes back to is your grass fed does have a little bit more from an omega-3 content, which we kind of talked about with the fish oil a little bit earlier. And it does, but like unless you're eating a lot of dietary fat, I don't necessarily think there's a huge difference on that side. Now, I understand if somebody's coming from an ethical standpoint, like, you know, the free range versus, more of like in your barn, conventional, I totally get and I understand and I totally respect that. And like I said, the fat content of free range grass fed is a little bit better on that side. I always tell people, you know, look at where you're at, you know, financially. You know, admittedly, if I have something that's grass fed, say a grass fed steak next to a conventional steak, and they're relatively the same price, or, you know, the grass fed's a little bit more, like, okay, I can justify that. But, you know, I'm not going to necessarily pay, you know, $5 to $10 more for a pound of grass fed. From a health benefit standpoint, I don't necessarily think it's there. You know, where I think that money could be better spent on other areas trying to improve your whole diet. So like I said, there are health benefits, you know, a little health benefits here and there. But I think a lot of it is, it's one of those things that if you're able to do it, more power to you. But I don't think you're necessarily at a loss if you're unable to afford the grass fed of everything. And that's the thing too, if you're looking at even various proteins, talk about how they come from, you know, grass fed cows. If you're looking at that, I once backtracked it out, and like per serving, it was like the equivalent of like, I want to say it was like, don't quote me on this, but it was like 11 milligrams of total, where you're looking at 5 grams for an effect. So like I said, if you can afford the grass fed, it's definitely better. But the actual differences in the fatty acid content, I do not think are necessarily strong enough to convince me that you definitely have to have grass fed to elicit whatever gains you're going for. It's, you know, if you actually look at the data, the differences are not substantial. And most people who I know, it's not like they're eating all the grizzle on their steaks. You know, most people cut that away anyhow. So
Yes. Same question here, but now for organic versus non-organic fruits and vegetables.
I'm much of the same way that I am with if I can go organic, you know, if they're side by side and they're relatively close cost wise, and, you know, I can afford it, I'm always going to lean towards the organic version. You know, if you look at different research, there's different research showing like the vitamin and mineral content is relatively the same of the two. My bigger issue is like, you know, maybe some of the pesticide residues or things of that nature potentially having effects. You know, unfortunately, we don't have enough long-term studies, in my opinion, to kind of totally determine, you know, conventional versus the other. But like I said, I feel better if I can go organic on things. But admittedly, I can't, you know, it's hard to do from a cost standpoint to go organic on everything that you're grabbing. So if you're able to do that financially, if it works for you, I definitely encourage it. Or if you see something on sale and they're relatively close in price, you know, when those are the situations, I'll probably always lean towards organic. But I don't think it's necessarily a game changer on a huge level if you're taking care of every other part of your diet.
Are there certain fruits or vegetables, or even the meats, the cheeses, whatever it may be, any one of those that we just talked about, that if you have kind of that financial burden, are there certain ones that you say the organic or the free range or whatever, the grass fed, are they superior, or there's two other variations? And like I'm saying, I've seen like the dirty 13 or something like dirty.
Yeah, the dirty 13. Those are the ones like I always lean towards, where, and a lot of them are more of your sweeter type things, where they, you know, based off the studies, they seem to have higher residues of pesticides. So those are the ones where when I'm comparing things, I fall more towards organic if I can grab it at those times.
Okay. Awesome.
On that level.
Yeah, encourage listeners to go look up the dirty 13, and then if there's a cut line, lean towards more of those ones than the ones off that list. Yep.
Exactly. I mean, if you find something that's not normally, I mean, you know, you look at various grains and you start looking at the amount of actual pesticide residues are almost nil, if any. And so those ones, like, you know, spend your money on the ones that appear to have the higher concentration based off, you know, the various research studies. That's that's where I'm leaning my money towards financially when I'm comparing, okay, do I want, be it grass-fed versus non-grass-fed, organic versus non-organic.
That's awesome to know. You know, sometimes you run into the high and mighty organic or grass fed that, yeah, like you said, for ethical reasons, great. But like you said, for nutrition value, it's kind of a myth that you have to go that route in order to maximize your nutritional benefit or, you know, performance.
Yeah, I mean, and that even goes back to veganism. You know, on that level, I have all the respect in the world for vegans. I've worked with a fair amount of vegans, and you know, I've even if somebody looked at my diet, it'd be like very similar to a lot of vegan-based foods. I don't really use soy at all, but like a lot of that idea of a lot of fruits and vegetables, and then I just add in healthy, meat. So I definitely respect, vegans, but I think sometimes people get the idea that, that is a superior diet, because it's all plant-based and things of that nature. And there's a lot of benefits, but there's still, there's deficiencies that will, kind of creep up in your diet if you're not on top of things. On that, I totally lost my train of thought where I was going with that. So I do apologize to the listeners at home. I had a great thought when I started talking, and it kind of fizzled out when I was coming through.
No problem. So now, Sean and I are talking. We're a couple days past Thanksgiving here in the Midwest. We've been lucky right now that it's not too bad, but it's about upper 30s, lower 40s. And so tomorrow, inevitably, I'll have an athlete coming after school with a bottle of Gatorade. Even though it's not hot, they just came from class. So give me your thoughts on Gatorade and Powerade, those type of sports drinks.
I think Gatorade and Powerade have done a wonderful job in promoting obesity and blood sugar profiles of a type 2 diabetics and youth populations as a whole. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I believe there is some truth to that. Most of the time, the individuals do not need those sport drinks. Where those sport drinks really come in handy is in hot weather, because for the most part, all they are is sugar water, and then they have some electrolytes in them. Where the Gatorade and Powerades have like those, so there's research showing that your body can absorb water into the circulation much faster from those as opposed to pure water, which, I can't refute that data. It's, pretty solid. And for those reasons, I'll use it, hot weather when someone is training hard. Because that's the thing too, where the carbohydrates seem to have the greatest benefit is when you're doing, say, 45 to 60 minutes plus of relatively continuous high intensity exercise training, on that level. So they do have, seem to have some benefits on that side. I think you can also get relatively the same thing by taking, say, 100% fruit juice, or in terms of the carbohydrates, or even, having a pre-workout, small snack, you're going to have those carbohydrates in your system. I think will have similar effects if you're having like an hour and a half session. But where a lot of people take it, though, where it drives me nuts is, let's say you have someone, as you kind of described the situation you're just describing, it's cold weather, it's not really a super intense workout. It's not like they really have to replenish their blood sugar levels. You're not going to get much of an effect. Or the classic one that I see all the time is, you go to a youth baseball tournament and every kid's running around with their Gatorade bottles, and it's like, okay, you sit on the bench for half of the game, and the other half of the game you're, standing in the outfield. You're active for like maybe 4 or 5 seconds out of 3 minutes if a ball's hit your way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you really don't need to be replenishing. It's not like you're getting into these states of depleted carbohydrate stores, or where like you're exacerbated because you've sweated out so much water, and if you don't get that fluid in yet, the optimal rate, you're going to be suffering. So I think that's one, again, going back to the marketing. I tip my hat to the marketers at Gatorade and Powerade. I think they've done a fabulous job on that level. But the need to have them, I do not think is, in about 90% of the cases, I think they're a waste.
Yeah, there's a very specific use for them, and somehow that has been translated to all day, every day, drink Gatorade.
Yeah, exactly. It's also I have the mental image of like the kids running around with one of those helmets on that have like the cords going from their things into their mouths like 24/7.
Yeah, that's funny.
And that's one thing you also have to be careful with too. Is, so a lot of people look at, and this is kind of on a subtle marketing level, is they both pair them a lot with athletes. So be it NBA athletes or NFL athletes or whatever they're doing. And for those conditions, I mean, they're playing 2 hours straight. They might be playing multiple games in a row. Because I mean, I'll do that if I'm working with individuals who like a basketball tournament during the summer. You're in a hot, sweaty gym that doesn't have air condition. You're playing back-to-back games, and maybe you have a 30-minute rest, and you have another game. It's going to be pretty hard to get solid food in during that time period. We're having some of those sport drinks can have some benefit there. But like, I think so many people confuse based off how they're promoted as health drinks. Sport drinks are not health drinks. There's a very specific purpose for them, and they have a very specific role, but they are not there to improve your overall health. It's there to help your performance at that specific time, and that's it.
Yeah, that's well put. That's awesome. You have to distinguish between the two, because they are not, like you said, a health drink. You don't need it for breakfast or before bed or just carrying around during school. Like you said, very specific things, hot weather, multiple games that they're needed outside of that time frame or that window. You're really not getting any benefit, except the huge sugar, the calories that they're hidden in there.
Yeah, it's almost like soda. I mean, obviously, a can of Mountain Dew has more sugar in it than a Gatorade. But this is more for me working, that's not necessarily with athletes, but just people in general. Very few people realize how many calories they drink during a given day. And I think that has a huge contribution to the obesity epidemic that's going on here in most of your westernized locations.
Yeah, that's good. Let's move on here. Last 3 questions for you, Sean, here. Number 1 here, give me 3 books that have changed your coaching or have been highly influential to you.
3 books that have been highly influential to me. I'm gonna add like a 3A on one of them that kind of popped in my mind the other day. But the one that, from a coaching standpoint, that has probably had the greatest impact, and just the way I look at athletics and just the holistic thing, is Ian King, who's a brilliant mind. He's had some very strong things in the industry, but he wrote a book called I don't remember the exact title off my head, but it's called Winning and Losing. I want to say like 16 years of working with elite level athletes. And it was published maybe early 2000s, I want to say, maybe 2004 or 5. But he's a coach out of Australia that's worked basically with athletes in every Olympic Games. I want to say Summer Olympics since like 1984. So, I mean, worked in a pile of things. And he really talks about in that of making sure that as a coach, you're doing it for the right reasons. You're truly invested in your athlete's success, that you're in realizing your role. Your biggest role is, being able to prevent injury, extend careers on that level, and just, and just his approach on various things, be it focus, be it, changing cultures, the culture of a team. As you know, a culture of a training environment is very important. So, I mean, it goes into those issues. Like I said, there's a lot of good themes that kind of resonate through that book, that kind of detail his experiences and lessons he's learned by working with, elite level athletes for a significantly long time period. So that's one.
He's a guy that you turned me on to, Ian. I didn't really know about him till we've talked about him in the past. But then, you do some research on him, and like you said, he's got some just awesome training philosophies, ideas, principles. But one thing I think he's not a big name in the States is because we've talked about this. There have been some coaches that have taken and outright plagiarized his stuff, bastardized his stuff, and he's just hit up kind of a wall here in the States, running into some bigger name people that have kind of thrown his name underneath the bus despite all that he's done. It's interesting to look at his career and how that's, kind of hit a roadblock in the States in a small sense.
Yeah. It's crazy. You have on that level, and it's sad to see in an industry where you had that happen. But yeah, I agree 100% with you. So that's, like I said, that's a big book, and his coaching philosophy, very impacting me on both a very holistic level. So that's a big one. The other one that I very much appreciated was Charlie Francis, who, for those not familiar with his name, he's an elite level, or he's since deceased. But the late Charlie Francis, he wrote a book called Speed Trap, and the book is built around his experience. He was a sprint coach who had a lot of great philosophies, and his most famous athlete is Ben Johnson, who was in the '88 Olympic Games. He set the world record, but he got busted for steroids. And the book is kind of somewhat geared around that that whole experience with the Ben Johnson. But in it, he really details, his training philosophies that he was doing in the '80s, which were kind of light years above what most of your coaches in America were doing. And I know he always talked about kind of like the myth of the aerobic base to a degree, and where you have to run long, slow distances for 30 minutes at a shot. And Ian King talks a lot about that similar type of stuff as well. But one of his lines that always sticks with me, and I maybe this is paraphrasing, it might not be the exact words, but he talks about the aerobic base, and he said something along the lines of, every coach out there today is trying to make a base that's 100 miles wide. I want to have a peak that's 100 miles high. I want to build someone fast at 10 yards. Once they're fast at 10 yards to 20 yards and 30 yards and 40 yards and down the thing. So that was very influential for me from a pure coaching standpoint. And it kind of opened my eyes too. He goes into a lot of the politics that goes on with high level sport performance and just the things that go on there. So that was a very interesting book on that level that impacted me. The other book this is kind of like a 3A book. I said there's kind of 2 at 3, but The Sport Gene, which is by David Epstein. That was a very fascinating book. There's always that discussion, about, 10,000 hours is it nature versus nurture and things on that level. And the one line in there, and I may not be saying this right, but that really stuck with me was he had a line along the lines looking at nature versus nurture in the human body. And he made an analogy along the lines of, your genetics are your hardware, but your what you do with, what you add into that hardware is like your nurture, your environment. You can have awesome software that's going to make your genetics work. It's going to make just like a computer system. If I have average hardware, I can, I'm going to be limited with what I can do. That being said, I can add in a lot of software programs to make my computer run better and better and better, but there's going to be a ceiling on it. On the flip side, you can have amazing hardware or amazing genetics, analogy-wise, can have amazing genetics, but if you don't add in the right motor programs, if you're not working hard, you're never going to reach the potential you're going to be at. So that was a very fascinating one for me. That's the kind of coaching thing I took away from it. And he went through a lot of just kind of cool, almost science type stuff. Which was fascinating. And then the other book that has had a really strong influence on me, and it's not even about sports, it's actually one of your classic books from literature, but is people are often surprised when I say this, but like Gulliver's Travels, which kind of details, it's your classic literature book you read in, say high school or whatever you read it. But there's a lot of lessons I think in there that talk about, when he's visiting these places that kind of touch on, like some people have a huge, an overemphasized idea of their self-worth, and they think they're all high and mighty, where in the big scheme they have just as many, no one has, clean skin if you look at it under a microscope. And, that's what I always think about. Like, no one has clean skin if you're looking at it under a microscope. So don't think you're high and mighty and realize you're not necessarily better than one or another. Those are kind of things that are there. And, on the flip side, the other thing there in one of the islands he goes to, and people are living like hundreds of years, but their quality of health is horrible by the end of their lifespan. They're just, really poor on that level. And that's what I kind of going back to the, nutrition and kind of my thoughts of, what we should be doing, be it from a training or nutrition thing should be, relatively speaking, improving overall health and, having high quality of life up to the very end, and not, doing things, even if you live longer, who cares? But if your quality of health isn't there, it doesn't matter. So, and that's more of like a global. I realize that's not necessarily directly tied to sports, but those are the Gulliver's Travels. Like that book kind of resonates with me a lot. And then those 3 more sports specific type books I enjoyed.
Next one here. You're out for dinner and you can bring 3 guests, dead or alive. What 3 guests do you bring?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Put you in the spot with this one.
I know, right on the spot. I would grab I would love to grab Theodore Roosevelt.
Yep.
Theodore Roosevelt was alive. He's the American president. For those who are a little shaky on their U.S. history, he was the president throughout the Great Depression as well as World War II. And, the longest term president, U.S. history. That'd be a super fascinating conversation. Second one I would bring to the table would be I would love to bring to the table Red Auerbach.
Yeah.
From a sporting standpoint, he had I could go either Red Auerbach or
John Wooden.
Don Wooden. Yeah, I was just about to say John Wooden from UCLA. If you're able to create a culture that has that amount of success and continued success, anyone can be good for 1 or 2 years. It's the people who are good for 10 to 11 years. Just like, how did you do it? That'd be a person I'd also want on that table. And the other one I would want on that table would be it would probably, interesting enough, it'd probably be, trying to think. This really doesn't have to do with sports or anything on that level, but I'd be very interested in Julius Caesar on that level.
Yeah.
He was obviously alive. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to like ancient civilizations on that level. Obviously, he had a lot of success in what he was doing, and with forming a little bit of the modern day government type principles, and on that level would be interesting on that side.
Yeah, he'd be an interesting one.
Yeah, that'd be the three people I would grab pulling back from history if I could.
Excellent. Well, Sean, where can our listeners reach you?
All right, so for those looking to reach me, they're more than welcome to either email me, Sean at dieteticadvantage.com. I'm usually relatively quick responding there. We're probably the easiest. I'm really quick in back on is Facebook. My page, invite me to be your friend. I'm happy to get back to people. I've been fortunate where a lot of people have shared things with me who I reached out to, so I always try my best to try to get back to people in a timely manner on there. That's another easy place to reach me. If they go to caseperformance.com, that's where I run a lot of things through. There, you can hit submit an email there on our contact page. Those all circulate back to me. So those would probably be the best three things. Facebook, that email is a decent one, and then like I said, just go to Case Performance and drop an email on that side.
Well, Sean, this has been a blast, man. You shared a ton of just good information. I just love. We know each other pretty well, so I just love the fact that you are very detail oriented and anal about the research. You can just rattle off research like nothing, and going through all the supplements and just the whole thing. You just did a great job. I got a ton of notes. I'm going to have to go back through and listen to this a couple more times just to, wrap my head around some of the things you said. So I really appreciate it. You did a great job.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on. I only associate myself with people who I hold in equally high regards. Thanks for having me on the show. And I feel the same about everything that you're doing there at Building Better Athletes.
Appreciate it, Sean.
All right. Sounds good.
Join me in thanking Sean for this wonderful episode of the Elite Performance Podcast. All I can say is, holy smoke, Sean shared a ton of great information. There's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the nutritional and supplemental world. If you would, please give us a like or follow on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at BBA Performance, or on Facebook at Building Better Athletes. Please give Sean a little shout out and thank him for his time sharing such great, valuable information for all coaches, personal trainers, and nutritionists out there. Until next time, we'll see you back on the Elite Performance Podcast.